Welcome to today's explainer. So, if you're an IT support engineer or a developer, you absolutely know this drill. You're deep in the zone, working in your codebase, and suddenly an urgent ticket comes in. You need to test an API endpoint, like yesterday. Usually, that means tabbing out of your editor, firing up a heavy external application, and just completely shattering your flow. But what if you could test APIs natively, without ever leaving your codebase? Well, today, we're exploring a radically efficient workflow using the REST client extension for Visual Studio Code.
Think about the friction of your current API testing routine. You're trying to investigate a really time-sensitive issue, but instead, you're just sitting there staring at a loading screen because heavy external GUIs can be incredibly demanding on your system resources. You have to navigate away from your code, sync your cloud accounts, maybe deal with complex workspaces, all just to do a super quick API check. On the flip side of that, we have the REST client. It's an extension that turns a simple, lightweight text file right inside your editor into a fully functional HTTP client. No account syncing, no heavy Electron apps crashing on you out of nowhere, just you, your code, and instant responses.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our agenda for today's explainer. First, why skip Postman today? Then, set up in your first request, building advanced requests, variables and environments, a real-world support scenario, and finally, REST client versus Postman.
All right, Section 1. Skip Postman today. Frictionless workflows. Look, for quick endpoint checks, we really have to prioritize speed. And the REST client extension allows you to keep your API examples right in Git. This is huge because it means your requests are version controlled alongside the backend codebase they actually interact with. They evolve exactly as your API evolves. Plus, it's incredibly lightweight and fast. There's no separate app, no exporting collections back and forth. This leads to zero context switching. Your .http files essentially act as living, executable documentation. Imagine a new support engineer joins the team. They just open the repository and boom, the API tests are right there, ready to go from day one.
Moving on to Section 2, Setup and First Request. Quick installation. We know you guys are technical, so we aren't going to hold your hand too much here. To set this up, you literally just open your VS Code extensions panel, Control-Shift-X, search for REST client, and look for the one authored by Hu Chao Mao. Hit install. Once that's done, create a new file in your project and give it a .http or .rest extension. And that's it. You're set up.
To make your very first request, you just type the HTTP method and the URL. For example, type GET, followed by a public API URL, like JSON placeholder. Now, the magic happens the moment you type that. The REST client extension's parser immediately identifies the format and dynamically injects a little send request code lens link right above your text. You just click that link and the extension instantly opens a brand new pane on the right side of your screen showing the full HTTP response. No bulky GUI required, just a totally seamless text-driven workflow.
All right, Section 3. Advanced API requests. Let's go beyond simple gets.
So, what happens when you need to send data? You simply type out the post method, the URL, and your headers, like content type, application/JSON. But, and listen closely because this is critical, there is a syntax rule you absolutely must remember. A blank line is completely mandatory between your headers and your request body. That blank line is literally how the extension knows the headers have ended and the JSON payload has actually begun. It keeps things clean, it's readable, and it's perfectly commit ready.
And this perfectly illustrates a gotcha that traps so many experienced developers. If you're grouping multiple requests in a single file, you have to separate them, right? Well, because we are all so used to Markdown, developers constantly try to use 3 dashes as a separator. But for the REST client, this is completely wrong. If you use 3 dashes, the extension actually treats them as part of the JSON body. This will cause backends, like the Django REST framework, to throw parsing errors because it's receiving invalid JSON. The correct and honestly the only way to separate requests in this extension is by using 3 hashes.
Section 4. Variables and environments. Dealing with dynamic values.
Okay, so right at the top of your .http file, you can define local file variables using a super simple syntax, @variable name equals value. Then, anywhere in your request, whether it's the URL, the headers, or the body, you just reference it by wrapping the name in double curly braces. This gives you much cleaner, reusable code right inside your text files. But you're probably wondering, what if you need entirely different values for your local machine versus production?
Well, for multi-environment setups, the best working solution is to define your environments right in your workspaces.vscode/settings.json file. You can set up a shared environment for common variables and then specific blocks for your local or prod environments. The extension actually gives you a really handy environment switcher right down in the bottom right corner of VS Code. But guys, here is a massive security warning. Because your settings file might now contain sensitive production tokens, you absolutely must add it to your .gitignore file. You seriously do not want to accidentally commit your production secrets to your public repository.
Section 5. Real-world support. Troubleshooting live.
Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're a support engineer. You are right in the middle of writing some complex back-end logic, and boom, an urgent ticket pops up. Urgent! User ID 404 is getting a system error. Can you check their account status immediately? Now, in the old days, you would sigh, open up a heavy GUI tool, wait for it to load, find the right workspace, and finally navigate to the endpoint. But not anymore. Let's see how frictionless this actually is. You just stay right in VS Code, you open your repository's supportchecks.http file, you click the bottom right corner to instantly switch your environment to prod, you update a quick variable for the user ID, and you execute the GET request using your variables. Boom! You've securely hit the production endpoint without ever exposing the base URL or tokens in the file itself, and best of all, without ever losing your place in your codebase.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer wealth of information you get instantly in that inline response panel. Obviously, you immediately see the status code, but it gets so much better. By simply hovering over the total duration in the status bar, you get a full granular breakdown of the response time. It details exactly how many milliseconds were spent on socket, DNS, TCP, and download. You can inspect the headers to see if maybe a load balancer dropped something and zoom right into the formatted JSON payload. It's literally an incredibly powerful diagnostic tool that just pops up right next to the code you're actively debugging.
Finally, Section 6, REST Client versus Postman, choosing the right tool for the job.
So the crucial point here isn't to say one is always better than the other, it's knowing when to use which. The REST client is optimized for flow. It's your go-to for quick IDE checks, rapid support ticket investigations, and keeping Git-tracked living API documentation right alongside your code. It's text-first and it's fast. Postman, on the other hand, is a massive full lifecycle platform. It absolutely reigns supreme when your team needs to do heavy load testing at scale, write complex JavaScript-based test assertions, run automated CI/CD pipelines, or manage highly collaborative enterprise workspaces. So use REST Client for that daily, fast-paced inner-loop iteration and save Postman for the heavy lifting and large-scale enterprise governance.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. The next time you find yourself groaning while a heavy application slowly loads just so you can check one single endpoint, I want you to ask yourself, are your API tools actually helping you stay focused, or are they actively breaking your daily engineering flow? I highly recommend installing the REST Client extension and just giving the .http file workflow a try. It really might change how you handle your daily support tickets forever.
Thanks for exploring this with me.